Hello guys, welcome to another session. So here in this video, we are going to discuss the next phase of modern Indian history. So that's the period between 1805 to 1813. So we'll quickly cover the most important facts, just like the way we have covered Lord Warren Hastings and Lord Cornwallis and then John Shore and then Lord Wellesley. So we discussed about 1773 Regulating Act, 1784 Pitt's India Act, and then we have discussed the reforms during Cornwallis period, the civil service reform, the police reform, the judicial reforms, and then we also discussed about the land tenure system, the settlements like the permanent settlement, the Mahalwari settlement, the Rotwari settlements, and other things. And then we have also discussed during the period of Lord Wellesley, the subsidiary alliance, right? So here we will be seeing the return of Cornwallis and then the brief rule of George Barlow and the more significant tenure of Lord Minto I. And Minto I is very important. This is Minto I. Exactly after 100 years later, the Minto II will come. There we will be discussing and studying Morley Minto reforms. But this Minto is different. This Minto I, that will be Minto II. So that's exactly after 100 years. And most importantly, here we will be studying the Charter Act of 1813. So in this period, the first Minto also have something very significant, Charter Act of 1813. The next Minto, you will be seeing the Morley Minto reforms during 1909. So we'll be coming to that. So again, this is a landmark when it comes to India's economic and educational history and why it is considered as landmark. I'll be discussing. So when we talk about deindustrialization in India or why industries are not developing in India, the most important point that we will discuss is actually the 1813 Charter Act. That's the end of monopoly. We'll come to that. Okay. So let's start with this Lord Cornwallis return. There is nothing much to discuss during this period. So we have already studied his reforms. You know about Lord Cornwallis, and he returned briefly, in 1805, but he died within few months. So nothing significant have happened during this period. From exam point of view, basically you can skip this. So I'm not much interested in discussing anything during this period from UPSC or our exam perspective. Now, next is Lord George Barlow from 1805 to 1807, and his period is significant for the White Mutiny. So normally when we talk about mutiny in our history, we normally discuss Indian soldiers protesting against the Europeans superiors, right? So it could be related to discrimination, and that's actually one of the reasons for 1857 revolt also. So these are very simple things which but since this is White Mutiny, this has happened between the whites, the Europeans. So it's between the European officers basically protested against the salary cuts or the cuts in allowances. And beyond this, there is nothing much during Lord George Barlow period. So this is a mutiny. There are hundreds and thousands of mutiny when we discuss about Indian history. But this one, it's a White Mutiny. So that's why I thought of discussing this. Now let's quickly move on to Lord Minto. Okay. So this is a period. So here, see, when we talk about Minto, his period, if you see, it will be from 1807 to 1813, and this rule is very important. Two themes basically defines this period. The British concerned about Napoleon's possible alliance with the Indian rulers. That's one. And the internal developments. That's where I want to focus more on. That is especially the Charter Act of 1813. So let's break that down. And before discussing 1813 Charter Act, I can discuss other aspects also, like the Treaty of Amritsar, which is something again considered important from prelims perspective. So 1809, the British have signed the Treaty of Amritsar with whom? With Maharaja Ranjit Singh of Punjab. And this agreement actually defined the boundaries, and the Maharaja, the Ranjit Singh, was recognized as the ruler of Punjab. But the company, of course, secured its own frontiers. And the larger aim, if you see here, it is basically to block the French influence in North India during this Napoleonic wars. Okay, so keep this treaty in mind because they can ask you map-based questions and even polity-related question also. So Treaty of Amritsar, 1809. And apart from that, there are some other minor political and military events which you can remember. That's the Siege of Bharatpur, and then the Travancore Rebellion. But I don't think that they will ask you in prelims, UPSC prelims. So if you look at Travancore Rebellion, then that's led by Veluthampi Dalawa. So that's the Dalawa of Travancore. So again, it is related to the against the company's interference, and it was suppressed brutally by the company. And Velu Thampi actually died heroically here. So again, you can note this point during the Napoleonic Wars, the British occupied Java and the Moluccas. That is to prevent French control of these regions. So Minto's foreign policy was clearly shaped by global development. So that is related to the foreign and other areas. What my concern here is to discuss 1813 Charter Act. So let's quickly look at the important provisions. I'll discuss four, but two are very important. The first and the most important one, it ended East India Company's monopoly, except in two items, that is, trade in tea products and trade with China. So East India Company monopoly ended, except in two items, trade in tea products and trade with China. And remember, next Charter Act that is going to come in 1833, that will end the monopoly completely. These two surviving monopoly also will be over at that point of time. So here, monopoly of East India Company ended, except in two items, that is trade with China and trade in tea products. That will also be ended in 1833 after 20 years. So here, what does this mean? Other companies also can come to India and they can establish trade in every areas except in the other two. So the company's charter was renewed for 20 more years with this now. Okay. Now, one more point. This is related to education. I told you again, when we discuss about modern Indian education, the way it evolved, the development, this is from where you can start with. So the company was directed to spend rupees 1 lakh annually for the promotion of education in India. And this was a first official step in the history of state education in India. So when we talk about education, there are milestones. So this is the first milestone. And then later in 1835, we talk about Maculum Minute. And then we discuss about Wood's Dispatch later. And then we discuss about Hundar Commission. So this is how the education have actually shaped the modern education system in India, how it is developed and how it is evolved. This is the first official step in the history of state education in India. Okay. So again, I just kept this one. So 1 lakh annually for the purpose of education. And then one more, missionaries were allowed to preach in company territories. Okay. So that is again another provision which you can remember. So far they were not allowed. Now they were allowed to preach in company territories. So again, there are, you don't want to see it with in a negative way, because there are a lot of discussions that these missionaries, they came here to convert people to Christianity, but that's not the case. 200 years of British rule, if they wanted to convert Indians to Christians, it could have been easily done in the 200 years, but that's never happened. Christians are still minority, just 3%. So we don't want to get into such kind of discussions. We'll talk about the facts and what exactly it is. Now coming to 1830 Charter Act, the consequences. See guys, see, this is a real exam focus, right? The impact of this act, they can ask you this in mains also. See, when we say that monopoly ended, now what will happen? The other British companies and many British merchants, they can enter to India. And what will happen? They started dumping the cheap products to India, the machine-made goods, and especially this like Manchester clothes, the Liverpool clothes, etc. These are produced machine made, and it's so cheap, and they started dumping these products in India. So what will happen now? Indian handmade goods could not compete, right? If you look at the finishing, then that looks so good. And if you look at the costing, that's more attractive. So Indian goods, that means the artisans, they lost their livelihood, and that led to widespread poverty in India. And this caused the deindustrialization in India, because in India now there is no scope for further development of industries, because everything is pumped, everything is dumped in India, which is already cheap, which is already good and finished products. So now later I'll be talking about something else, why they started expanding their regions also because of this. Okay, I'll be discussing about that after some time. That will be during the next Governor General period. They started expanding their territory during this period. Because of this, that is what again one of the impact, because Now they need more political control and economic, the requirement also for the raw material and for dumping the products. If they need market and they need raw material, I'll come to that during the next Governor General. But let's discuss about deindustrialization parts, this area now. So what will happen? The artisans, they lost their livelihood, and this actually displaced artisans, or they actually shifted to agriculture. So someone who was doing this kind of job, now they shifted to agriculture. Already, we are facing disguised unemployment there. Many people are working in agriculture already, 60, 70 percentage of the population working over there. So agriculture absorbed unlimited labor now. But again, what is the issue here is output is the same, land remain the same, output remain the same, and this is what the economists actually call as disguised unemployment. So the marginal productivity of the additional labor was zero. So suppose there were 10 people who were producing in the land, even if 2 3 people are joining extra, but the production remained the same. So extra people, their productivity remains actually zero. They are just for the sake of employment, they are part of it. And agriculture basically became overcrowded at this point of time, and industry stagnated, and that's what exactly you see now. If you look at the developed countries, the order will be reversed. Agriculture may be less contribution in employment also, and more in terms of industry. But here that's not the case. 60% employment is in agriculture, and industry is very less, services is also less. So this structural imbalance basically remain for quite long period of time, even now also, not just a century, even now also we are facing the same. And what is the root cause? 1813 Charter Act is the root cause why industries have not flourished in India, why industries have not developed in India, and what is the reason for stagnation in industries. Okay, now coming to the next one, that is related to education. So here, this you can add in your essay also. See, this education clause of 1813 Charter Act, why it is very significant. For the first time, British government accepted some kind of responsibility for promoting education in India. So 1 lakh per year was to be spent for the purpose of promoting education, right? In those areas where they have control. So after that, you can see sequence of, educational milestone. There's the first one, the first grant, you can say, Charter Act of 1813 and 1835 Maculum Minute. So they'll be talking about English education, and then the downward filtration theory, I'll talk about that. 1854 Wood's Dispatch, that's what called as the Magna Carta of modern Indian education. And then 1880 to the Hundar Commission, they are focusing on primary education there. So again, always keep these, in chronological order. Even if you get a question on, in essay related to education, you can start writing. We discussed multiple approaches, right? 10 different approaches to write an essay. In that, one of the approaches, chronology based approach. So this is how 1813, there's a first step, 1835 Maculum Minute, 1854 Wood's Dispatch, and then Hundar Commission. And that's how education have developed. And we'll talk about, till now, what is actually happening, NEP 2020. That's how you'll be writing your essay. Now, so this much is clear. So that's it. So this is what I wanted to basically quickly discuss about during this period. So if I want to summarize, whatever things have happened during this time, Cornwallis returned briefly in 1805, but nothing significant for exam point of view. George Barlow, I discussed about White Mutiny. There are thousands of mutiny, but why this one is significant? Because it's among the Europeans. And then Lord Minto period, Treaty of Amritsar with Ranjit Singh, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and then Travancore rebellion and siege of Bharatpur, and expansion in Southeast Asia. And most importantly, the Charter Act of 1813 that ended the company's monopoly. Because of that, the other companies started coming to India. They started dumping their products in India, the finished products and the cheap products, and that led to ruining of Indian industries. And that's what you call as deindustrialization in India. And the impact even now also we are facing. That time artisans suffered, and that continued. Then there was no further scope of development for Indian industries, and that's what we are facing now also. So again, this is basically opening the private trade, and then education related also we discussed. So the impact you need to talk about agrarian dependence, why disguised unemployment, why we are facing that problems. I hope this is very clear. So basically what we discussed is this period, that marks shift from administrative reforms that we have seen so far to economic transformation during the British period. So the changes we have discussed the consequences, we have discussed, and you can expect questions also. And then when we proceed further, you will see further impact of 1813 Charter Act. Now, once more and more companies started coming, they want more control in India. So they want political control, they want, markets also, right? So they will start expanding their territories. So now you will see their efforts to expand the territories from here onwards. So far, they were happy with whatever they had. But now you will see they are going to expand. From the next Governor General, we'll be discussing that. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much. I see you in the next video.